Welcome, everyone, and thank you to those joining us live and to those listening in afterwards. I'd also like to warmly welcome our guests today, whom I'll shortly introduce. FIP's vision is a world where everyone benefits from access to safe, effective, quality, and affordable medicine and health technologies. Our mission is to support global health by enabling the advancement of pharmaceutical practice, sciences, and education. This is a special event today as we are launching our FIP AI Toolkit for Pharmacists. Today, we will have our working group chair, Dr. Whitley Yi, whom I will introduce shortly, conducting the official launch of the toolkit and walking us through some important points. My name is Brenston Hidge. I'm a pharmacist working in a hospital in the private sector in South Africa. I am chairman of the South African Association for Hospital and Institutional Pharmacists, as well as a member of the National Executive Committee of the Pharmaceutical Society of South Africa, as well as a member of the FIP TAG AI Working Group. And today I will be the moderator. Just a few announcements before we begin. Please note that this event will be recorded, live streamed on FIP YouTube profile, and it will also be available at www.events.fip.org. To those all listening, please feel free to send your questions through the Q&A box, and we will be picking up on those throughout today's session. You're welcome to provide feedback at the end of the webinar to webinars@fip.org. And finally, if you're not already a FIP member, you can become one at the link on screen. There's now a feature on Zoom where you can enable captions in your own language by following these 3 simple steps. The steps will also be in the chat box for you to follow. This is the program for today. We will start with what you can expect to have learned by the end of the webinar, and then go straight into welcoming Dr. Whitley Yi to launch our AI Toolkit for pharmacists and provide an overview of its contents. We will then move on to presentations from 4 speakers presenting on 3 topics, namely the use of AI in pharmacogenomics, a community setting, and education. After the presentations, we will open the floor to a discussion session, as well as allow questions from the audience. After the webinar, we hope that all those attending will be able to list the general types of AI models that are available, understand key AI limitations, describe the important considerations when implementing AI into practice, and finally, describe how AI can be used within the pharmacy landscape.
Brent, sorry to interrupt you. Just quickly jumping in to ask if you could please switch on your video so that we can.
There we go. Thank you, Farah. It is now my pleasure to introduce to you the chair of our FIP AI Working Group, Dr. Whitley Yi. She is the Director of Pharmacy and Member Services at WELL. She is also an adjunct lecturer at the University of Colorado, focusing on digital health and consumer informatics. And finally, she's also the co-founder of the AI Collective. The full bios of all speakers will also be in the chat. Whitley, I hand over to you.
Hi, Brent. Thank you so much. And welcome, everybody. I'm so excited to be here. So thank you to everybody that's watching live and for those that'll be watching later on the recording. So first off, just to get us started, I want to go ahead and just share the QR code here. So today we're gonna go over and introduce the AI Toolkit, but I want to first just give the link here. So if you have a chance, go ahead and download it so you can follow along if you'd like. And don't worry if you don't have a chance to download it right now, we'll also reshare this slide in a little bit so you'll have the chance to look through it. And go to the next slide. So what we've seen recently is a very big shift in our AI landscape. In the past, AI is not necessarily new, right? It's been around for almost 100 years at this point, but we've gone through many AI hype cycles, and we've had a lot of hope for what AI can do, and then a lot of times it's really fallen short and not been able to do that. what we've seen in the last few years is actually some radical transformation in AI capabilities with some of the new models that have recently come out and the recent progress with large language models. We're now seeing the emergence of new capabilities from these different tools. And this has led to an explosion of new resources and tools available. And not only that, because of this democratization of AI, we've now seen rapid adoption of these technologies. And when they come out, we've also seen that the time it takes for them to reach human baseline performance is continuing to shrink. So if you see the chart there on the right, that'll show you that, initially it took us quite a while to get to human level performance, but now with a lot of these models, it's just taking a few years, and now we're already achieving baseline performance. And so the accuracy of these models is continuing to get better and better. And we're now going into the emergence where we now have really what we consider AI general purpose technologies, and also moving towards agentic AI. So AI that can act as an agent and act autonomously. And so with all of this, this really means two things. One, pharmacists need to learn new skills. These new technologies are rapidly showing up across all areas of pharmacy and healthcare. And so we're seeing them show up in digital therapeutics and evidence-based medicine databases, in research and education. And pharmacists need to have model literacy and fluency. So you understand, what can these technologies do? What are their capabilities and limitations? So you know how to effectively and responsibly implement them and work with them. The second thing is that we want to empower pharmacists to actually be the ones that are driving this change. So these technologies are going to change the way we work, but we want pharmacists to be the drivers of this change. Right? So instead of just passively just determining, how this is going to affect the way we work, how do we want to utilize this to change and transform the pharmacy profession? And how can we as pharmacists be leaders in driving that change? So with this, the FIP Technology Advisory Group founded the AI Working Group. This is founded with a mission to help identify AI-related needs and opportunities within FIP. And I want to give a huge thank you to all the members of the AI Working Group. We go to the next slide. This slide outlines some of the key strategies and key priorities and outputs of the working group. And so one of the key outputs is to increase accessibility and availability of practical resources and guidance, and to help members navigate AI-related challenges. With this, the AI working group put out, we started a generative AI workshop series last year, and also conducted a survey to help better understand what are the current needs that we see. Go to the next slide. So one thing that was loud and clear is we heard you, is that there is overall low confidence and familiarity with AI. So the majority, when we asked respondents, that most feel just slightly familiar or not familiar with AI tools. So the overall confidence in using these tools is low. And the biggest challenges that we see is, one, unsure what even tools exist. And then among those that exist, how do we effectively use them? And then also ethical concerns. How do we use these tools responsibly and ethically and effectively? And so the support that respondents were saying that they need is, one, we need more training, and we need references to best practices, and we need more education and resources. And most people that, when they responded, said that most of what they knew about AI, or what they knew in AI, was all self-taught. And so there's really not many things that are built specifically for pharmacists. And so with this, the working group took upon ourselves to create the AI Toolkit. And now we know that, what we heard is that we know that there are many pharmacists eager and excited to adopt these technologies, but often it's a matter of not knowing where to start, or not having the right resources and guidance. And so this is really meant to help bridge that gap. So this tool is meant to be a practical, easy to use resource on how to get started when thinking about AI implementation. What are the things that you need to take into consideration? And what are the questions you need to ask yourself when you think about it? And so it's meant to be very practical and high level to help you really have a foundation of where to get started. Now, before we dive into the specifics of the toolkit, I just want to take a moment to give a huge shout out and express my extreme gratitude and appreciation for everyone that made this possible. This was a huge collaborative effort, and so I had the immense privilege and honor to get to lead this team. And this project and resource would not have been possible without the time, the dedication, and expertise of every single person listed on this slide. So thank you to all the editors, all of the authors, and everyone that provided input and feedback to make this slide possible. And also thank you to FIP staff for helping support this. So next I want to go over some of the sections. And we won't have time to go over each of these in depth, but I just want to give a highlight of how this is laid out. And so the first section is really going to focus on the fundamentals of AI. So it's giving a basic overview of what is artificial intelligence and what are the different kind of learning styles. So we think about, do we have reinforcement learning? Do we have supervised learning, unsupervised learning? Each of these is going to influence what the model can be used for and the different pros and cons of it. And so we can then kind of outline what are the different types of tools. The next thing we go through is assessing model performance. If you're going to use a model, you need to know the question is like, how will you know whether it's effective or not? And so you need to understand, what does it mean for a model to be high performing and accurate? What are the metrics that are even available for that? We also talk about the importance of model cards. So just like you need a nutrition label for food, or you need a drug label for medications, you also need a model card for any kind of AI model that's implemented. And this tells you how accurate the model is, how it performs across various different subpopulations. And so if you're using, for instance, if you're going to use a model and from a specific vendor and they don't provide a model card, that in itself is a red flag. And so that's one of the importance of why we need to assess model performance. And then we also go, the toolkit then goes into ethical considerations. And so it's very important, especially when working with deep learning. A lot of these tools are black box tools, right? So it's important that we take into account what are the fundamentals that we need to consider when building trustworthy AI. So the toolkit goes into what are the 7 requirements to build trustworthy AI, but also talks about mitigation strategies for the ethical integration. The kind, being able to have certain guidelines in place, needing to empower end users, making sure that you have constant validation mechanisms in place. And so all those are going to be key when you think about the ethical considerations. And then the toolkit also goes into compliance and regulation. And so what are this is going to be different in every country and region. And so it lays out a brief overview of kind of the regulatory landscape across each region and what to consider around data protection and privacy, and needing to take into account security and interoperability considerations. And this, again, is going to be different in every country. So it's really about giving a high-level perspective of things that you need to be thinking about if you're going to consider implementing an AI tool. The next big section is barriers to implementation. Now, we know some of these tools have been around for a long time, but they don't always get integrated, right? Because there are so many barriers to implementing any kind of new technology within healthcare. And some of the challenges that we face, one is algorithmic bias. And so the toolkit does go over some strategies on how do you minimize that. And the next is also model drift. So this means for every model, the performance of every model is going to slowly degrade over time. And so how do you mitigate and minimize that? And also overfitting. So this is when models are not generalizable to every population. So if you train a model perhaps to predict readmission or hospital mortality, and you train it with data from a specific hospital, that doesn't necessarily mean if you took that model and you applied it to a different hospital where it wasn't trained, it may not perform as well because that data is too different from the original data it was trained on. And so you have to think about, how do we make these models generalizable? And so that's one consideration with implementation. But the other big barriers to implementation are human and process related barriers, right? Everything is going to depend ultimately on the end user. Do you have buy-in from the end users? Are they willing to adopt and use this technology? And how do you integrate it in complex clinical workflows? These are all things that have to be considered and thought through whenever looking at how to integrate AI. Then I also want to highlight, we also go through educational competencies for AI. And so this will highlight what are the core things that pharmacists need to know. And so I think this is a great resource to take a look at that, to see high level. Here, if you're looking at what are the things that pharmacists need to know around AI, take a look at those core competencies listed there. And then for the next section, while I don't have time to go through all these sections in detail, I do want to spend a little bit of time going through the next section and giving some examples when it comes to choosing the right model. So AI ultimately is a tool. but it's not just a single tool. It's actually a set of a few distinct tools. And the great thing is you don't have to keep up with everything, right? So, I mean, you will see now that there's, hundreds of new products coming on the market all the time. But if you understand the basic components of what are the main tools in this AI toolbox, those are going to apply to any downstream product that utilizes it. And so what are the basic tools? When you break AI down into its fundamental components, you have your input, you have the model itself, and your output. And so the major inputs you have are going to be images. So this would be image recognition models, right? It's going to be natural language. These can be language models, or it could be tabular data. This would be data that you'd find in a spreadsheet. So typical things in an EHR, like vital signs, drug values, et cetera. And so each of these three different inputs are requiring different types of models. So use different kinds of tools for image recognition and different kinds of models for processing natural language. And so these are your three big buckets, right? And so the same pros and cons, the same limitations and capabilities of image recognition models are going to apply to any downstream product or service that is going to use that type of model. So as long as you understand the fundamental components, you can understand how these are applied later in any kind of product or service that uses it. And the next thing you want to consider with the model is it generative or is it predictive? Generative models are going to they're going to learn patterns from data and then use those patterns to create new data that's never existed. Predictive models are going to use and learn from patterns and data and then apply that to new data they haven't seen before to either potentially classify it or make a prediction about it, right? And so depending on whether you go generative or predictive depends on what types of outputs are possible. And there can be some overlap between these. So I want to give an example. And so this slide, the flowchart on the left goes through the different kinds of AI models that exist. And now this is not fully comprehensive. And so you may have a few things on there that may be missing, but these are going to be the core ones that you mostly see in healthcare, and that could be related to pharmacy use cases. And so that's why those are listed there. And so you have your type, but then you go generative or predictive. And then it also does depend a little bit on the learning style. Is it a reinforcement learning model or is it a supervised learning model? And then depends on what your input is. Is it language, image, or tabular data? And so to give an example of thinking through like the pros and cons, so say that one of the tasks that you want to do is you have clinical notes, right? And you want to classify those. You want to tag them as which clinical notes contain a medication related problem, because then you want to prioritize all those notes, maybe prioritize them for patient outreach, for instance. So you have two options. So option A, you could have a non-generative NLP model where you train it. You would have to take all your notes, label them. You would then train the model to recognize the label. And then when you run all of your notes through it, the model would then provide, yes or no, right? Does this contain a medication-related problem? Yes or no. This does give you, it's very controlled. It's very highly specific to your data. And you also have metrics to know how well it does or doesn't perform. The other option, right, would be using a generative model. So using like a large language model. The greatest things from this is that you don't have to actually do any training. These would be ready to go out of the box depending on what model you use. And so you could feed the model the note and include a prompt to ask it, does it contain medication-related problems? Yes or no. And then the model ideally would feedback a response to you. So the positive thing is that the implementation might be quite easy. However, there's also some limitations to think about. And so if you're using a generative model, for instance, a lot of times those are not going to be in-house. So if you have to send the prompt through an API or through the cloud to a remote server, you'd have to think about compliance regulations. Can you include patient information in that or not? Also, because you don't control the model, you have to think these models, anytime updates are made, the performance of it could degrade or improve. So you never know which way it's going to go. And so the other thing about option B is you don't actually know how well it works. So even though it gives you a response, you don't have any metrics that say how accurate is this model in answering this question, unless you actually do the validation yourself. But then every time you validate it, if the developers of the model make an update, that validation becomes null and void, and then you would have to revalidate it because you don't know what the implications of that model update are. So these are the pros and cons, but the cons of option A is that it's time consuming. You also have to have people with the technical expertise to then implement and build and deploy this model, which option B, you don't have to have any additional resource for deployment. So the question is, which option is better? And it depends. It depends on your situation, because if potential, if this is a very high risk situation, right, where we're making a mistake has significant consequences, then maybe option A is the best one to go, because you need a lot more control and you can't afford to make a mistake. But if this is a pilot program, for instance, and you're testing it out, but you also have a human in the loop that's constantly double checking everything, then option B might be the best option, because you could do it really quickly, right? And you always have a double check. And so this is where being able to weigh the pros and cons of each model becomes really important. Now, in this case, either model is an option, right? But it depends on the situation. There's also a few situations where some models are just never a good fit for a problem. And so if we go to the next slide, so not every tool is a good match. So let's say that you wanted, the problem that you are trying to solve is maybe you want to generate a random number, right? So you could ask an LLM, hey, a large language model, hey, please generate a random number for me. But actually, if you do this, because it's been tested, the vast majority of the time, it's going to give you the number 7, right? This is actually anything but random. So why does the model do this? It does it because these models are not magic. They don't, with a lot of these large language models, it appears that they magically can do every task they're given, but that's not actually the case, because they're not meant to be factual or actually understand the task. They're just meant to mimic what a general human response would be. So this model doesn't have any intrinsic knowledge of what choosing a random number means. It just knows that it just is mimicking what a human response would be to this question. And it turns out, if you go to the next slide, that when you ask a human, can you pick a random number between 0 and 10? Most of the times, humans will tell you the number 7. So these models are just mimicking human responses. They don't actually understand the intrinsic task they're being given. And so you have to know that to know what they can and can't do. They're autoregressive and deterministic. And this is where, if you do want to have a model that's going to be able to generate a random number, an LLM is a horrible option for this. It's better to use a simpler, low-tech option or program to do that. And this is where understanding the pros and cons become critical, because you have to know what each model can do to be able to effectively integrate it. And so one of the things that the toolkit does is it provides this pro and con list for each of these different models. So going through the models, it gives examples of what type of models exist, and then what are the capabilities, what are the limitations, and then what are some of the considerations that you need to think about with implementation. And so this is an example of what it looks like for the generative LLM models, but these are going to be different if you think about reinforcement models, for instance. So each of them are going to have different pros and cons that you need to weigh. If you go to the next slide, lastly, the AI toolkit ends with an implementation checklist, right? And so this toolkit is not meant to be a comprehensive technical resource to help answer every single question that could possibly come up when you're implementing AI. It's really meant to be the starting point. So when you think about using these tools, what are the questions that you need to ask yourself every single time? And how do you get started? What are the things you need to take into consideration? And how do you weigh the pros and cons of different option models out there? And so, for instance, the very first question here, when you're building your use case, is you have to know what your problem is. Before you can know what tool you want to solve it, you have to define the problem. So what is the problem that you're trying to solve? And is AI actually the best use for that? Could their problem potentially be solved with a non-AI solution? And then it goes into, how do you then weigh the pros and cons and look at which model is going to be the best fit for that? Then how do you put different safety mechanisms in place? So I encourage you to look through this checklist. And if you have any, implementations that you're looking at in your own practice, use this checklist against it to see, can you answer all of these questions for it? So we go to the next slide. So with that, I'm very excited to be able to release and share this toolkit with you. I hope you all find it extremely valuable. So you can find the toolkit by scanning this QR code or going to the URL there. And again, please download it, take a look. And we also always appreciate feedback. So if you have any feedback, if there's things that you find really helpful, that's always great to know, or different things that you wish were included in it, that's always grateful to know too for future iterations. So please take a look. And with that, Brent, I would like to hand it back to you.
Thank you very much, Whitley, and thank you for that comprehensive overview of our AI toolkit for pharmacists and pharmacy. So next, we will move on to a dual presentation between Dr. Gabriella O'Sullivan and Ms. Rhian Phillips. Dr. Gabriella O'Sullivan is a member of the Australian Government Gene Technology Technical Advisory Committee, as well as a member of the Gene Technology Ethics and Community Consultative Committee, as well as a member of the New Zealand Legal and Regulatory Affairs Committee of International Society for Cellular Therapy. Her bio is a lot more extensive than the summary on this slide, so please see the chat box for the full bio. And then the second presenter will be Ms. Rhian Phillips, who is the co-founder of both Software Studio Double Dash Interactive and Skybox, a health digital startup, and she is CEO of the Queensland XR Hub. I now hand over to Dr. Gabriella Sullivan, who will be taking us through the first half of the presentation entitled Genie.
Hello, thank you. I am Gabriella Sullivan. I'm the Executive Officer of Royal Prince Alfred Hospital Institutional Biosafety Committee in Sydney, which reviews gene therapy applications. And it's my honour today to co-present with Rhian Phillips, Creative Director of Double Dash in Brisbane. We thank Dr. Whitley Yi, Brent Sinhij, and the organisers for inviting us, and are delighted to be presenting the Genie project on behalf of our project team. Next slide, please. The aim of the project is to develop an AI chatbot, Genie it's called, that will provide guidance to help with the implementation of adenoviral vector, also known as AAV, gene therapy. The project is supported by the International Pharmaceutical Federation and Pfizer Quality Improvement Grant, and is a collaboration between the Pharmacy and Gene Therapy departments at Royal Prince Alfred Hospital. It's currently undergoing piloting as a research project. Next slide, please. Gene therapy project approvals and clinical trials are increasing, and a number of products have been marketed have marketing approval from major regulators around the world. And here are some of the well-known ones. Of course, there are growing numbers of other types of therapies, such as gene editing and CAR T-cell therapies, which are more complicated than straightforward gene therapies, such as CARVYKTI, which is for multiple myeloma. Our project is a proof of concept project and shows that there is potential for chatbots to be useful for AAV gene therapy, but also other forms of gene therapy. Next slide, please. The marketing approvals with public funding in some cases have engendered a need for guidance on how to prepare for the commercial rollout of gene therapies. This has led to an increased interest in the role of pharmacy. For example, Walgreens offers infrastructure and distribution models for gene therapies, and the European Association of Hospital Pharmacists, New South Wales Health in Australia, and the National Health Service Specialist Pharmacy Service in the UK and others have developed guidance for pharmacy handling of gene medicines. A number of papers, such as those by Petrish, Blind, Myers, and others, have been addressing this for quite some time now, at least since 2019, and we are seeing the re-emergence of specialist pharmacies as a result. Next slide, please. This slide outlines the aim of the grant on the project, which essentially is to assist pharmacy with the implementation of AAV gene therapies through a web-based chatbot that provides reliable information. Initially, we aimed it at hospital pharmacies that had the potential to treat patients, but lack of experience. However, the field has grown so rapidly that many hospitals and pharmacies have started to develop their own capacity in this regard. Next slide, please. Here is Genie and an example of a question being asked. The question is, does a pharmacy need GMP to dispense AAV gene therapy? Next slide, please. You will see that the answer given is that adherence to GMP standards, the GMP being good manufacturing practice standards, is required. In the citations given at the bottom, it also refers to some broad EMA guidelines that may be useful, but they're not exactly specific to the question. However, it also refers to frequently asked questions, which is more specific to the question and says that gene therapy manufacturing sites require GMP licensing, whereas a pharmacy dispensing a gene therapy product that already has been manufactured under a GMP license would generally not be required to have its own GMP license, unless it is also the manufacturer of the product. Next slide, please. Here are some of the issues that we've encountered in our project. We have had a small number of respondents, and so there's no quantitative data yet. Quantitative data would require a larger number of respondents than we have. However, qualitatively, we can say that there is a desire for more specific guidance for standard operating procedures and case studies. However, experience tells us that SOPs, or standard operating procedures, are quite site-specific, and so they need to be developed by each type of site. And in a sense, a checklist and something similar to what Dr. Whitley presented as checklist for AI is the kind of thing that this field, also the cell and gene therapy field, also benefits from because of the site specificity and needs of each site. However, there are papers and initiatives that aim to help with this, such as those produced by the AAV Gene Therapy Education Programme in Australia, the UK Specialist Pharmacy Guidance Document on pharmacy readiness, and the European Association of Hospital Pharmacists Guidelines, which was also assisted by a grant from Pfizer. So thank you for listening to me, and now I'll pass on to Rhiannon, who will elucidate the AI aspects.
Yeah, thanks so much, Gabrielle. So when I was approached in late 2021, we can go to the next slide, to help co-design an innovative technology-driven solution to support hospital pharmacies with implementing AAV gene therapy. The world was just on the cusp of the public release of ChatGPT. So our team had previous experience with machine learning. We've been collaborating with AI company LiveMind to look at real-world use cases of new large language models, or LLMs. So the timing of this opportunity was very interesting and good for us. Genie was conceived as a web-based intelligent chatbot that could understand user questions, process complex information from disparate sources, and transform this information to easy and actionable directions. The intelligent chatbot would use an intent recognition model to understand questions, utilize our LLM to maintain conversation context, rephrase, and contextualize for natural conversation flow, draw information exclusively from the platform's own knowledge base, be auditable with consistent answers and linked citations. At this stage, citations were outside the capability of GPT, as was referencing live websites. All the models were trained on data to a certain point in time, and LLM outputs were generated and often hallucinated from this data alone. And finally, it needed to be internationally relevant, supporting multiple languages and jurisdictions. Given how rapidly we saw AI space evolving, the system was designed to be LLM agnostic. Over the course of the project, we have trialed GPT-3, 4, 4.0, and Claude 3 Sonnet. So we landed on 4 to do the majority of our testing. At the outset of the project, we created a baseline set of questions with best case answers designed by our large team of discipline experts. And GPT-3, GPT-4 answers were generated, so we could use these as a test benchmark. I thought this AWS quote summed things up pretty well. You can think of a large language model as an over-enthusiastic new employee who refuses to stay informed with current events, but will always answer every question with absolute confidence. So that was the landscape we were working in. The key challenges were to constrain answers to approved resources, make sure they were consistent and auditable, and avoid made up or out of date information. So this issue of LLM hallucination is one of the most significant challenges for AI across healthcare. So constraining answers, in order to deliver accurate answers drawn from our approved resources, we needed to accurately interpret the user questions, review all of the content across our approved resources, and summarize relevant information in this natural conversational language, and include the references to these sites for auditability. So the next slide. To achieve this, we implemented a novel retrieval augmented generation, or RAG process, to optimize the output of our LLM to reference our own knowledge base rather than the data sources it had been trained on. So this was quite novel at the time we were doing it. It's a little bit more common now. Our approach was to use the language models exclusively for natural language processing, inject our own knowledge via a separate, more auditable knowledge management system. Our knowledge-based resources consisted of data we'd created ourselves, references to relevant web pages, PDFs, and videos. This process enabled us to constrain the chatbot to the domain and our own knowledge without having to train our own language model. There's quite a lot of R&D required to get to this point, and particularly to reach a point where we were confident in consistent results. And the testing overhead was significant because every time we changed a parameter, whether this was with the technology or the resources in the knowledge base, we had to run all of the baseline questions and all of the QA again. A decent challenge, which was touched on earlier, is the fact that LLMs are dynamic, and so they would change without any versioning. So exactly that point where, it could be working absolutely fantastically, and then next week it's degraded, and you've got to do a whole pile of work to get it back on track. So next slide. In addition, we spent a fair bit of time kind of iterating the Genie persona to get this right. So we've been very clear that it's a research translator, so it acts as an assistant rather than positioning itself as an expert, which is important and also wise in health environment. The persona was crafted to help medical professionals navigate complex information related to themes around gene therapy, all while maintaining a friendly and intuitive conversational demeanor. So unlike traditional AI assistants, Genie doesn't rely on its own internal knowledge, but instead searches through external knowledge base to find and interpret relevant information conversationally, similar, in some ways to how a research assistant might work. So next slide. So this is an example of its domain constraint. So I asked Genie to tell me about the weather in Brisbane, and right now it's 10:38 p.m. and it's about 24 degrees and raining. Genie searches the knowledge base, fails to find relevant information, and then politely declines to answer. It says, "I'm sorry, but as a gene therapy research assistant, I'm not equipped to provide weather updates." Next slide. So in this example, I've asked a far more relevant question. I've said, what are the guidelines for implementing gene therapy in Australia? And as you can see, it's quite hard to see in the slide, but you can see that it searches through the knowledge base and returns a relevant summary with references to Australia's TGA, which is what we wanted it to do. So next slide. So where to from here, and what would we do differently? So this has been interesting because as I started by saying, we were on the very cusp of the public release of GPT and working before that release through to like rapid advances over the course of doing the project and putting it through testing. I think the first one will be we would host our own LLMs. So there's some really good open source LLMs. That way it's local and we're not dealing with those versioning issues. The systems are as good as the data that they reference and learn from. And so we've had a little bit of feedback saying, well, Genie lacks answers like a little bit of specificity or a bit of detail. So this would be addressed through just building up our knowledge base. And the reason we have relied more on external sites than on our own knowledge base is just the significant overhead of maintaining this. So you're dealing with a lot of different jurisdictions and changing regulatory environments. So that's a big overhead to manage that. Next slide. So we've also been exploring, this is a LiveMind's advanced reasoning model. So we've been exploring some newer sort of cutting edge approaches to allow for kind of deep thinking, where AI will explore a number of different threads autonomously and find links and insights. And so it's a bit more complex than a simple RAG system. So that's the next model we're working on at the moment. So the next slide. And so as Gabrielle mentioned earlier, we're seeking to include pharmacists in leadership or senior roles to participate. And you know, if you're keen to support us in that testing process, there's Gabrielle's contact details there. So do get in touch. The next slide. There's been a lot of people involved in meetings every 2 weeks with the Genie steering committee. So just acknowledging the main collaborators, Royal Prince Alfred Hospital, University of Sydney, Double Dash and LiveMind AI, Consortium of Health and Social Care of Catalonia, Barcelona, Becton Dickinson and Company, Atlanta. Next slide. Yeah, so thank you so much. It was great to present today. Thanks for your time.
Thank you very much to Gabriella and Renan for that very interesting and eye-opening presentation on how AI is influencing and changing the way we look at pharmacogenomic pharmaceutical work. We can move on to our third presenter. Ms. Sangeetha Ramdev is a former clinical consultant pharmacy advisor in the e-referral space, and she is also a member of the FIP TAG working group. Once again, her full bio will be in the chat box. So over to you, Sangeetha. Thank you very much.
Hi, my name is Sangeetha. I'm a community pharmacist, accredited pharmacist, and a sessional academic from Australia. In today's presentation, I would like to bring awareness of AI applications in community pharmacy, in particular in the realm of medication management. I would firstly like to acknowledge the example of an AI avatar that I present today. It's a collaboration between the Pharmaceutical Society of Australia and Audrey. I've obtained permission from both the Pharmaceutical Society of Australia to share this unique program specifically designed to train credentialed pharmacists to perform medication reviews. In this presentation, I will discuss the role of AI in community pharmacy, to feature AI in a community pharmacy and medication management setting, to provide a generative AI example in medication management experiential learning, and to explore advantages, challenges, and future scope of AI in medication management. So firstly, what is AI? AI, or artificial intelligence, is a branch of computer science dedicated to creating systems capable of performing tasks that typically require human intelligence, such as learning, reasoning, problem solving, and pattern recognition. There is a growing use and further need of AI in pharmacy. In community pharmacy in particular, we find that AI will improve workflow efficiency and decrease operating costs while promoting safety and accuracy in processes. We may find AI examples in deep learning, large language models, and generative AI, i.e. an AI model that can generate contact based upon a prompt, images, or text. The most common part of AI is that pharmacists may be utilizing it in their daily practice without realizing it. A common application of AI in community setting is in inventory management, example, predicting stock levels and the patient's future drug purchases. This enhances stock procurement decisions, saving the business entity time and money. Next slide, please. Basically, what we have discussed is that AI can improve our systems to lead to increased efficiency, enhanced decision-making, improved patient care, and better patient outcomes. A vital component in a pharmacist's role is that of history taking. We know this as practitioners. To elicit patient history is essential to the result that we provide the patient. This is none more important than in medication reviews. Next slide, please. Generative AI has an enhanced role in the teaching of medication history to pharmacy students and pharmacist learners. The collaboration between Pharmaceutical Society of Australia, PSA, and Audrey aims to innovate community pharmacy practices through AI technology, specifically in medication management. This partnership facilitates the integration of AI solutions to optimize pharmacist roles in patient care. The program focuses on training credentialed pharmacists in Australia to utilize AI avatars for medication reviews. This specialized training ensures pharmacists have the skills necessary, clinical skills, and the art of patient consultation. Next slide, please. Let's meet our PSA Audrey AI medication review avatar. She is an 80-year-old woman who lives independently. I decided to ask the avatar a few questions. A medication list was provided, but this needs to be confirmed for accuracy and appropriateness with the avatar. Using voice-activated prompts, the learner is able to interact with the avatar, probing using a combination of open and closed questions to elicit an accurate and timely patient history. As you can see from the slide, in the history-taking component, the learner is able to interact with the avatar in an in-depth manner. Firstly, we inquire how the patient is faring. She clearly explains to us there is a medication knowledge / health literacy barrier here. She knows she has started on atenolol, but she does not have an indication of why she uses it. She expresses to us that she is managing her medications, but is lonely. This particularly provides a cue to the learner to empower and empathize. This will be evident later in the learner's conversational skills assessment. Adherence is crucial for medications. Upon asking the avatar regarding this, she says that she has difficulty adhering to her medications, despite having it packed in a dosette by her pharmacy. A more astute learner may probe further. Upon inquiring regarding allergies, she explains that she has an allergy to penicillin and its reaction. This shows that the AI provides clinically significant information that can be only extracted by appropriate questioning. Next slide, please. The clear power of the generative AI platform is the integration of conversational skills assessment of the patient interaction combined with therapeutic skills assessment of the recommendations. This is where the learner can hone down on their weaknesses and gain feedback in a real-time and productive manner. Next slide, please. The first evaluation is that the generative AI tool provides is the conversational skills assessment. As you can see, the learner in this particular case gained 3 out of 5 for empowerment. The empowerment scale evaluates a pharmacist's recognition of the patient's expertise in change, rewarding equal partnership and penalizing pharmacist-dominated interactions. The AI tool states that although a moderate level of understanding was shown incorporating the patient's contributions, an ideal response would be where the patient's contributions contribute substantially to influence the nature of the session. The learner also gained 3 out of 5 in empathy. The empathy scale assesses how well a pharmacist understands and conveys the patient's perspective, focusing on empathy distinct from sympathy or support. AI evaluated that although the pharmacist demonstrated to understand the patient's perspective, deeper empathy was required. So the pharmacist must show more deeper understanding of the patient's point of view. So what AI does in this assessment, it actually provides illustrative suggestions for improvement with multiple alternative ideal responses in contrast to the learner's statements made to the avatar. Next slide, please. Empirical questioning is imperative to obtain a good medication history. Generative AI assesses an induction protocol for pharmacists using this program. In this learner's assessment, it marked that a formal introduction was made, the purpose of the meeting identified, consent obtained, confidentiality and privacy discussed with the avatar, and the goals of the review outlined during the interview. However, the learner failed to gain consent to access to online records, and this is why thus lost some marks in the introduction protocol completion. This rigid approach by the program ensures that the pharmacist training receives accurate feedback regarding their formal approach to the basics of an interview. Next slide, please. The first part to the therapeutic skills assessment was diagnosis. As you can see from the slide, the pharmacist gained 83% in the coverage of medication provided. They are provided a medication list, but as you know, compared to real life, we always must check this list with the patient. AI evaluated that the learner had discussed the medication, reasons for use, and checked for adherence. Deficiencies in the medication list questioning and confirmation of the medication list are vital in real medication reviews. And this is clearly evident in this exercise as well. Next slide, please. As pharmacists, we know that delving further into a patient's history means ensuring that we're capturing hidden medications. The AI tool ensures learners are covering these components to gain a complete and accurate medication history. As you can see from this table, the learner has questioned the avatar on over-the-counter medications, different formulations, complementary recent medication changes, allergies or adverse drug events, smoking, recent hospitalizations, and challenges with adherence. In this case, the learner has not specifically questioned the patient regarding the use of alternative medications, alcohol, and challenges with ingestion. The coverage of non-prescription questions amounts to 73%. The learner sees exactly where to improve, and if the avatar was not specifically questioned, it would not divulge this information, possibly leading to an issue not being uncovered and treated. Next slide, please. This is a key slide. What the AI tool is telling us is to what percentage of accuracy of medication behavior is being identified. In this case, it was 75%. The learner uncovered the patient's episodes of recurrent vaginal thrush and recurrent dry cough, as well as forgetfulness to medication dosing. But the learner did not uncover the patient's difficulty in opening the dose set box. Next slide, please. This is our final assessment from the avatar. This clearly shows us the quality of the proposed intervention, ranking according to behaviors that require modification. The student is able to refer to the doctor for recurrent episodes of vaginal thrush. This meets expectations, but doesn't provide further lifestyle advice to prevent recurrence, exceeds expectations. The student is able to refer the patient to the doctor for recurrent, possibly medication-induced dry cough, but does not communicate the need for an in-depth review with the doctor with follow-up checks. The student is able to identify that there is an adherence issue and suggests setting alarms or reminders, but fails to examine the issue in depth and seeking further support. The patient's difficulty opening a dose set box is not uncovered, as this student did not probe further to uncover that this is a root cause of non-adherence. Next slide, please. The key question is, how does our avatar replicate a human patient consult? Yes, the avatar has unique personality traits, general knowledge base, and clinically significant information that can only be extracted during the consult. Users engage with the avatar through voice inputs to allow for a dynamic consulting experience, which optimizes their patient interactions. What is the clinical benefit? They hone their questioning and clinical skills in a safe, friendly, and real-life environment at their own pace. On-the-spot and in-depth generative AI feedback leads to deeper learning, increased proficiency, and confidence. And why use AI rather than have a human interaction? AI forces the student to be specific, to raise intent specifically, to provide context, and be wary of contextual cues, define the format of the outputs, use a combination of open and closed questioning, be mindful of bias and model limitations. This is akin to a human interaction, especially in vulnerable populations, patients with mobility or dexterity issues, or where health literacy may be a problem. This critical appraisal of any model or human interaction is vital to these learners as they learn and complete to practice as pharmacists. medication reviews. Next slide, please. The promise of AI is that AI tools will keep on emerging in the coming future. And this example shows us how we can equip future practitioners to gain exposure to such tools, to use them efficiently and quickly, realizing the limitations of each model. Of course, in future, such tools with real human data will come with challenges such as data privacy and necessity of training pharmacists on new technologies. But this early exposure will at least stem the hesitancy of using new technologies. I hope this example today has shown a unique perspective of the development of AI technology in medication management training. This is crucial for improving patient outcomes in pharmacy. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Sangeetha, for that overview of the use of avatars in training our pharmacists to better take medication history, patient history, and how to better consult with our patients in general. And your future outcomes, we hope that we realize all of these outcomes with the growing AI exposure in the world, and especially in the pharmacy environment. So thank you very much, and we will open the floor to some questions to you a little bit later. Our next speaker is Dr. Claudia. She has leadership roles in clinical access and digital innovation at Oregon and Novartis. She is the founder of the book Pharmaceutical Care in Digital Revolution, a lecturer of digital pharmaceutical care at the University of Utrecht, and founder and CSO of Pharmy, an innovative digital pharmaceutical care platform provider. So, Dr. Claudia, thank you very much for joining us today. Over to you.
Thank you, Brent. Do we still have 10, 15 minutes for the presentation?
Yes, we have time.
Okay.
Yes, all good.
Okay, thank you very much. Well, thank you all very much for participating in this webinar and showing interest in the evolution of AI. Also, congrats to the team for making such a highly valuable document. And I'm happy to share and to have the opportunity to share some thoughts on you of the topic of education. Can you go to the next slide? As Dr. Whitley already in the beginning said, 97% in the AI survey that we recently did refer to the fact that training is needed. And I hope to share with you in the next 10 minutes why and how to get into a continuous learning mode is required, because that's one of the crucial messages. The development of technology in general and AI in particular goes that fast that we need to continuously re-educate ourselves if we want to stay on top of all these developments. So in the next 10 minutes, we will have a look at the impact of AI, why education is crucial, look at how will it impact pharmacy roles, predominantly in the pharmaceutical care environment, in the pharmaceutical care domain, and what might be smart things to do to add to our training curricula in general. Next slide, please. In many of our healthcare systems, there are quite some challenges. These are just a number of examples. We see workforce shortages because of a growing demand of care, and there are limited healthcare professionals available. We see rising costs due to aging populations, due to more and more expensive treatments, and also inefficiencies in systems. There are accessibility issues, long waiting times, regional disparities in care. There is a digitalization gap, which means that there is a slow adoption and integration of digital health solutions. It goes slower than in the consumer world. Of course, we all know the bureaucratic burden, excessive administrative tasks, and the disease burden and the medication use, rising polypharmacy are important things that are quite some challenges in many healthcare systems. Next slide. AI may have an answer to that. It may reduce some of these challenges, for example, by automating routine tasks and allowing healthcare professionals to focus on more complex care, which is required. From a cost element, it may reduce operational expenses and optimize the resource allocation that we have. From an accessibility issue, one can see that telemedicine and diagnostics to improve healthcare access may allow access, for example, in underserved areas as well. The digitization gap can be reduced by AI by driving interoperable digital health system. Many health systems in many countries don't talk to each other, and further interoperability will definitely improve the access for patients as well. Well, the reduction of administrative processes, reducing paperwork and manual approvals might, of course, be something that AI can support in. And from a disease burden and medication use safety, one can see that predictive analytics, as has been explained earlier in this webinar, can help by early intervention, personalized care, and also error detection in an early way. So AI can really, on different domains within the pharmaceutical care, reduce the challenges. Now, let's go to the next slide and have a look at what does that mean for the type of work that we are doing. And I quickly want to take it back to a more general overview. It's a bit small, I see, but I'll put some highlights and key messages on the slide. And most importantly, you can afterwards get the video and have a look at the overview a bit longer. But if you look at the future of work and the impact of AI, there are a number of fast-growing and fast-declining jobs. And basically, the fast-growing jobs, they all are in the area of AI and tech jobs. They are heavily concentrated in data science and cybersecurity, software development. And basically, the growth there is reflecting the increasing reliance on technology and automation. On the other hand, we see a decline of administrative and clerical roles, like traditional office jobs like administrative assistants, secretaries, data entry clerks are among the fastest declining due to the automation earlier reflected. And that has an impact on pharmacy as well. If you go to the next slide. This is just a vision on what might be the impact on pharmacy jobs. And these at the right side are not the definite names, but I can envision that, for example, a pharmacy assistant in the future might be a digital over-the-counter pharmacy specialist, helping in the digital area to give information on the prescriptions. A current medication reviewer might in the future be a remote medication monitoring expert, or maybe even a remote medication monitoring avatar. A dispensing pharmacist might become a digital therapeutics advisor, because pharmacists may shift from only manual dispensing to guiding patients on AI-powered digital health tools and personalized treatment plans. Inventory managers may be an AI-driven pharmacy supply chain analyst, and there are many, many more examples. It's just a vision, and these new type of roles, they require certain skill set. If you go to the next slide. These are the skill set that the World Economic Forum has indicated to be essential for the fast-growing jobs in 2030. If you group them, you could say the technological and digital skills are essential, having education and being informed about big data, AI, basically technological literacy is very important. But what is very important as well is that the human and cognitive skills remain vital as well. Creative thinking, analytical thinking, as pharmacists are extremely good and well trained in, and resilience are crucial for adapting to rapid changes and fostering innovation. And also, being a leader in this transformation by implementing these skills and helping your teams and your team members to move into that area will be important. That brings me to the next slide, because often we ask ourselves, will we be replaced? And a lot of our workforce may be anxious with the development of the avatars that we saw before, that we fear our jobs or the job's content. However, I think in general, more and more we see that in healthcare and also in pharmacy, AI will not replace pharmacy teams, but pharmacy teams who are not familiar with AI, maybe less equipped pharmacy and pharmacy teams. Apart from the fact that I personally think that AI is also the word for apothecary intelligence. But in general, we need to know more about it. If you go to the next slide, the essential competencies for AI using pharmacists are basically, as we said already before, understanding what is AI possible to do, like it was reflected, what is the difference between NLP and generative AI, and definitely know its limitations. To, from a data point of view, understand and interpret data output from AI tools and know how to use it in analysis and clinical decision support. As said, also continue to think critical and know what what can help you and what cannot help you. And regarding the communication skills, the AI can generate the information, but communicating it to patients and healthcare teams is still one of our most important competencies. So that's something also to put quite a lot of effort in. If you go to the next slide, if you want to learn on why these competencies are so important and to learn more about how AI is impacting in healthcare, there are many, many examples available. And these are only a few ones. There are online courses where you can log in, where you can get free modules, where you can have low-cost trainings, etc. And platforms like Coursera, EDX, Udemy, have a look at them online. Many universities, they all have online courses available about technology in healthcare in general, AI in healthcare more in particular, and sometimes there is also AI in pharmaceutical, in the pharmaceutical domain. Basically, these courses cover AI principles and how to use them safely and effectively in healthcare. And they are flexible learning options, so you can do them all over the day in your own time and space, and also in your own speed, of course. The professional organizations in many countries have trainings as well, and there is a lot published on AI. This is an interesting part because the current publication strategy with peer-reviewed processes, etc., sometimes is taking so long that once the research that has been done on AI is being published, it's already evolved into a next model or a next version. So I think also our publishing strategy should be further developed to stay on top of the real fast developing and evolving AI models. And third one, well, hands-on learning and collaboration, just do it. Start working with data scientists, with healthcare professionals, learn about them together and engage in forums and try in small, take into account the risk, but continue to practice and to test with it yourself. That's really something that where you can learn and grow the fastest. If you go to the next slide, this is also an example of other trainings that are available. For example, Harvard has an AI in healthcare training, which really helps you from the strategic decision to start into the implementing part in your healthcare environment. And what also is interesting to say is that many of these platforms have free practical courses on different elements like how to work with LLMs. Well, you can see it at the right side. Not all of them are free. Some are free, some are not. Stroll through them. As said, there are many free ones. It's just a matter of searching for it. And these are some tips and tricks to find them. If you then go to the next slide, apart from the environments that indicated on the last two slides, there are also I think that we as a community, we as a pharmacy environment need to consider to add topics to our training curricula. The training curricula for the students of pharmacy who are becoming a pharmacist, but also in the postgraduate environment, elements like fundamentals of AI, how to use AI in our clinical decision support system, understanding how AI can assist in medication therapy management, drug interactive management, personalized medicine. That is something that need to be part of the training curricula of our students and of our postgraduate education. Same is applicable to digital therapeutics. Those are technological applications that sometimes are an add-on to drug treatments and sometimes are the treatment itself. How do they work? How can we integrate them with our traditional medicine is something that our students need to be informed about. And also, I think it's very important to be trained as a pharmacist on how a human and an AI is going to collaborate, how the synergy can work, what is required from our communication, what do patients expect, and to be really trained on that also from an ethical and a legal point of view. That brings me to the last topic, and that's the topic of a little bit of experience, what we've done from this in this respect. In the Netherlands, since 6 years in the Netherlands, we provide our master students of pharmacy at the University Utrecht with a course that they voluntarily at the moment can choose called Digital Pharmaceutical Care. It's once a year, it's 5 weeks. The students have 2.5 weeks of interactive training with all kinds of guest speakers on implementation, on the topics that I earlier referred on. And also, for example, one day about ethical use of technology in pharmaceutical care. Then after 2.5 weeks, there is a hackathon or an innovation sprint, as we call it, in which in one day there are all kind of inspiring sessions with a certain team. This year it will be AI in pharmaceutical care integration. And then afterwards, groups of students choose a topic, and the next 2.5 weeks they are going to develop an innovation and report and present on that. We've done this now for 6 years. It's every year at the University Utrecht, some 30, 40 students that follow it. It ends always in a publication in the Dutch Pharmaceutical Journal, and all students, that's really all of them, feel better prepared for their professional start. And next slide. We will not have time to go to all of the details, but if you look at the video later, you will see the course schedule over here. And also an overview on the final reports that students make, where they really have to think on what is the problem that I see in the pharmacy, what is the innovation, what are economic considerations. For example, an innovation that never can be reimbursed is maybe not so smart to develop. So is it scalable? What will be the impact on the society? In 2.5 weeks, they make excellent reports on these topics. And yeah, it's really a recommendation to consider this to in your curricula. That brings me to the last slide. Thank you very much for listening in. If you want to know more, of course, there is the Artificial Intelligence Toolkit, but there is also the book that we made with about 15 to 20 experts called Pharmaceutical Care and Digital Revolution. You can order it at the FIP website, and there is a very large part of the book is dedicated to also explaining on what is AI, where can you find it in the pharmaceutical domain, and what to do to be trained in it. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Claudia, for that very insightful and interesting presentation on the use of AI in education and why it is so important. And I always will remember your abbreviation AI being apothecary intelligence instead of artificial intelligence. So yes, let's move on to some questions. I see there have been 4 questions in the Q&A.
Brent, sorry to interrupt. Just mindful of the time we have for the session. We're running short. We're already behind with 15 minutes. I see that most of these questions have been addressed in written format. Perhaps we can just start wrapping up.
Okay, sure. So thank you for that, Farah, and sorry for running over time. To all our speakers, on behalf of the AI Working Group, I extend our sincere gratitude for your invaluable contributions to this webinar. We're honored to host such experts joining us from around the globe, each offering unique and insightful perspectives on the evolving landscape of AI in pharmacy. Your presentations covering critical areas such as how to choose the right AI model to use, to AI use in gene therapy, and how AI elevates our pharmaceutical education. It's really provided a comprehensive overview of this transformative technology that's at our fingertips and ready to be improved upon. So we deeply appreciate your willingness to share your expertise, your research findings, and practical experiences. So your insights have undoubtedly enriched our understanding and fostered a stimulating dialogue, as I have seen in the questions and answers. So thank you once again for your significant contributions to the success of our event today. This is just another reminder of the barcode and URL that you can download and view the artificial intelligence toolkit developed by the AI Working Group. You will find that in the chat as well. Then for all future FIP digital events, you can just search for events.fip.org. You can also find the recordings there. And then a reminder about the 83rd FIP World Congress of Pharmacy and Pharmaceutical Sciences that's happening this year in Copenhagen, Denmark, from the 31st of August until the 3rd of September. This year, the theme is Pharmacy Forward, Performance, Collaboration, and Health Transformation. There are 3 sub-themes within the Congress, and it's making it sustainable, making the system work, and making it personal. I just want to bring your attention to the important dates. The 2nd of June is the deadline for early registration, and then you still have until the 11th of August if you want to do a late registration. So for more information, you can go to the Congress website, which is copenhagen2025.fip.org. And we hope that everybody will attend and enjoy the Congress with us so that we can meet you face to face. And this year, the Congress will be made more accessible with an AI-powered Snapsite, which allows you to enjoy live translations of all Congress sessions in more than 70 languages with our new feature integrated into the already amazing FIP Congress app. So thank you to everybody for attending, and please reach out to our speakers, to the FIP TAG group if you have further questions. Thank you very much.